start singing and see if she notices.
To God be the glory, great things He hath done.
It's not working.
Oh, we're watching you. Good evening. Welcome back to church this evening. I hope everybody had a good afternoon, relaxing or whatever you wanted to do. I know if you're a Redskins fan, you're probably disappointed. I thought they were going to pull it through, but anyway, I can't call them the Commanders. I'm sorry. I never will. Anyway, we're going to begin our service with singing To God Be the Glory, page 44. We'll sing all three verses, and let's stand as we sing, page 44.
Great things He hath done, so loved He the world that He gave us His Son, who yielded His life an atonement for sin, and opened the life gate that all may go in. Praise the Lord, let the earth hear His voice. Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give Him the glory, great things He hath done. Oh, perfect redemption, the purchase of blood, to every believer the promise of God. The vilest offender truly believes that moment from Jesus a pardon receives. Praise the Lord, let the earth hear His voice. Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give Him the glory, great things He hath done. Great things He hath taught us, great things He hath done, and great our rejoicing through Jesus the Son. Our purer and higher, greater will be our wonder, our transport. Jesus we say, praise the Lord, let the earth hear His voice. Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give Him the glory, great things He hath done. Let's pray and you can be seated. Father, we thank You for this time that we could gather in Your house for fellowship, for singing Your praises, and to study Your word. Bless us this evening in Jesus' name. Amen. You may be seated. Before we go into the next song, I'm going to give you an update. I've been asked to give an update this evening, so I will do that.
It's not turned.
Okay, I'm going to let you handle
right,
that.
I'll
How's
do that.
that? Yeah. So, to give you some background, December 22nd, I got a call from an Army chaplain. I've known him for years. He went to our church in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He was a chaplain assigned in my Special Forces group. We had bumped into each other in Afghanistan, my last tour there several years ago. And then we both spoke at my best friend's funeral, Mike Ennis, who had gone to be with the Lord. So we've had a close relationship. He called me and he goes, hey, I got this guy. I told him to call you because you're the guy that can help him out. He's in dire need of help. His name is Dwayne Friesen. I'm like, okay. Dane Friesen calls me and goes, hey, I'm Dwayne Friesen. He says, I am the director of Assist International. It's an organization that helps persecuted Christians get out of harm's way. Well, that was music to my ears because honestly for a couple decades, my heart has been for the persecuted Christians. I pray for them often, and so I thought this may be an opportunity. He said there's a family who had their properties, an Afghan family had their properties confiscated by the Taliban. They escaped Afghanistan and went to Tajikistan. While in a refugee camp, a Baptist mid-missionary led these two families to the Lord. So you see two families up there. The one guy is missing. So the guy on the left is the dad, next is his wife. The little girl, Dunya, is hiding, and then the three boys, then there's another little boy and a mom. That's the translator's wife, the one on the right. And they escaped, and they were led to the Lord. I can tell you, in 28 months in Afghanistan, I had never, ever heard of a Afghan Christian. And so this U.S. Baptist mid-missionary led them to the Lord, discipled them, got them into a church, the mission church there. But the little girl, Dunya, she was 7 at the time, has a very serious heart condition. Isn't she beautiful? Isn't she? And you know what? She's the quintessential 8-year-old little girl, just as sweet as could be. We need to get her into the States immediately because she is in very bad shape. And so we began praying. I contacted Representative Ben Klein's office, said, hey, can you guys help me? I don't even know where to start. Yeah, so they connected me with the Customs and Immigration Service. We got the right paperwork. And then I contacted Operation Renewed Hope. Many of you know Jan Milton. He's been here several times. Asked if he could assist as well. He got a guy by the name of Dr. Stephen Durst. Did you date his brother, David? Oh, you don't know? Okay, well, see, there's this tangled web here, right? So, I mean, that's the rumor. So, we were friends. So, anyway, Stephen Durst is a doctor that deploys with Operation Renewed Hope, and we got him involved, and he went full bore. Well, Operation Renewed Hope and us, we hired an attorney, an immigration attorney, because we were getting nowhere with the paperwork. And we needed this expedited because this little girl, Dunya, will die without the medical care. And so he got involved. He and his attorney pushed all the paperwork through. We had still Ben Klein and Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina help. Dr. Durst lives in Florence, South Carolina. He is associated with the Medical University of South Carolina. That's where my daughter-in-law graduated from. And so we got this together, and then Stephen Durst calls his brother David Durst and says, hey, do you remember your other girlfriend? She's now a physician at Medical University of South Carolina. So this guy's a player. So I'm glad you hooked up with Doug here, right? So we got a hold of this physician who is a believer, and she went to the pediatric cardiology section, briefed them because Dr. Durst did a video conference with the little girl and a translator and a Tajikistan doctor, had all the information to give the cardiologist. They said, yes, we can do this, and yes, we will do this, but it's $500,000, right? Well, so we'll worry about the money on the back end. We just need to get her over here. And so we continued working. CIS, CIS, they approved the humanitarian parole. They approved the expedite. So Dr. Durst flew over to Tajikistan. They still had to go to the embassy to do biometrics and to apply for the visa. He ensured that happened. Listen to this. They did the biometrics and the application, and in one day they got the visa. That never happens with the State Department. But there was a bunch of people, you included, that have been praying about this. Operation Renewed Hope purchased the airline tickets for both of those families, 10 in total, including Dr. Durst, to come to the States. The plan was that they were going to fly into Atlanta. Dwayne Friesen and I were going to fly into Atlanta, rent a van and a pickup truck, one for the luggage, one for the people in the van, and then drive them to Florence, where Dr. Durst works out of, get them set up, get her approved for Medicare. We had to have the family in the States and apply for Medicaid, not Medicare, Medicaid, before the end of September. Friday was the last day. Friday, she was approved and got her Medicaid number. Stephen Durst, Dwayne, who lives in Canada, drove down to my house. Now, mind you, he's had this chaplain talk about me, right? So this guy thought I was like Rambo. So the funny thing is, he knocks on the door, I open the door, he's looking ahead. He's a big guy. And then he looks down. I'm it, man. You know, so we kind of laughed over that. He brought flowers for my wife and sucking up, so he did well there. The next morning, early in the morning, we drove to Dulles, flew to Atlanta, picked up the vehicles, a slight delay in getting the van, but thank the Lord we got it. The church, had paid for that transportation, the pickup truck and the van, to take them to Florence. By the time they got through customs, it was 10 o'clock. We started on our way to Florence. They were hungry. We stopped at McDonald's. They had never been to a McDonald's. And they're looking, so we got this big board to pick, you know, and they had no idea what to choose, so we're helping them. Their eyes are like this. And the manager's like, we're closing in 10 minutes. I said, hey, ma'am. So I told him the deal. He goes, you guys take your time. And so we ordered. They ordered all kinds of stuff. Trays of food came out. They're eating McDonald's French fries. Little Dunya. Somehow she went up sitting by herself. Well, during the evening, she was very shy, of course. She's the celebrity, right? But she's very shy. Here's all these Americans gawking at her and wanting to talk to her. Well, she's sitting there by herself, so I went over and I stole a French fry, and a big smile came on her face. And then, of course, I did Mr. Ducky. I did Donald Duck, and a bigger smile, so we kind of got that bond. We continued on after McDonald's and drove into Florence. Took us 5 hours. So we got there at 3 a.m., and their church, Berean Baptist Church in Florence, rented a very large home out in the country. It was enough for both families. So there was 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, and it was good still having a translator there, obviously. As I mentioned Friday, they got the Medicaid number. Their card will be here, but the big thing was the number. It was approved. Sometime this week, they're driving to Charlotte, actually Hanahan. The hospital, Medical University of South Carolina, is in Charlotte. The church in South Carolina, Restoration Community Church, my son's church, they are sponsoring them for the next 4 to 6 months. So they're getting homes for them. They'll provide them with a cash stipend each week to help them, provide them with food, American clothing, and get them integrated. One of the men in a church who owns some type of manufacturing plant can hire both men to work there, so they'll be earning a paycheck, which is always nice. And so the prayer requests are 2 main things. Well, 3. Obviously, Duna. So we got to pray for her. The team of cardiologists will be working with her and doing the workups over the next couple weeks, and then they do the open heart surgery. And then there'll be that recovery time, and then they'll apply for amnesty, because this humanitarian parole is good for 2 years. Pray that they don't get sent back. They can get sent back to Tajikistan. Tajikistan could say you're going back to Afghanistan. They're dead people if they go back to Afghanistan, so that can't happen. So pray for that. Secondly, pray that the mom and dad learn English. The kids will learn it. They'll pick it up in school. We know by having foreign exchange students here, they pick up very well. So pray that the family, especially mom and dad, learn English. That's vital. And then the big prayer request is we need 2 cars. So we need a car for both families. So please, tonight during our prayer time, Please pray for those three things for this family. But honestly, just to see the way God moved, how God's people jumped in, everybody had a part. The only thing I did was I pulled in a couple people, and they honestly did the bulk of the work. Jan Milton with Operation Renewed Hope, Steve Durst, the medical doctor from ORH, and the attorney. We had a wonderful attorney. She pushed things through. And obviously the guy that brought this to our attention, Dwayne Friesen. And pray, I think the door is opening up for me to work at least part-time with Assist International, which blesses me because that's right down my alley. Sneaking people out of a country into a friendly country. We're looking at setting up what we're calling lily pads. So we're going to find quasi-friendly country that we can move persecuted Christian out of that country onto this lily pad, right, which would be, a country where they can stay temporarily until they get some sort of amnesty. Then we'll move them to U.S. or Canada or a Western European country. So I'm thrilled to be a part of that ministry now. So that's it. God has been good. It took a lot longer. I thought God was going to make this happen like that, but God's timing is His timing, and it was perfect timing. It took January, February, March, April. It took almost 7 months, right? So it took a while for this to happen. But God is good. That's the update. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for praying, for giving, and forgiving. You guys have been gracious to me by forgiving me many times over and over. But thank you. That's the update, and I just wanted to share that with you. Do you have any questions? Comments? All right, let's do our next song. Turn to page 22. Oh, magnify the Lord with me. We'll sing first and the last.
Magnify the Lord with me, and bless His holy name. Sing praises to His majesty, and all His works proclaim. Oh, magnify the Lord. Oh, magnify the Lord. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and bless His holy name. We come before the Father's throne, and there our Savior meet. We shout Hosanna to the King, and worship at His feet. Oh, magnify the Lord. Oh, magnify the Lord. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and bless His holy name.
Pastor?
Good, thank you, Joe. So we do not know when the surgery will be yet, is that correct?
Should be within the next couple of weeks.
Couple of weeks, okay. All right.
Keep you posted.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. Let's go ahead and turn to Daniel 6 tonight. Daniel 6. And just a reminder for you folks who are faithful to our Sunday night service and our prayer time, next week we have discussion group fellowships, and so we don't have a Sunday night service when we do that. And so next Sunday night we will not have 6 o'clock service, and then the week after that we do, and then if I remember right, the next Sunday is a 5th Sunday, and we don't have them on the 5th Sunday either. So pay attention to the schedule on that. So on Sunday nights, we have done different things, and I want to do a few things out of Daniel, not necessarily just simply an exposition of Daniel, but some lessons that we learned from Daniel's writings. And so we're going to skip around a little bit, but some things I think you'll find practically profitable for us, not just simply the the details of his prophecy, but some things that we really learn about people and that we learn about prophecy. And then we learn a lot about prayer, actually, from Daniel, more than you would think. And I want you to look at some lessons on that. And that's one of two reasons that I went this direction, because Sunday nights we pray together, and so we want to know, what is prayer? How do we have effective prayer? And Daniel is, in my mind, one of the more effective prayer warriors in the Old Testament. We don't normally first think of him, but when you study his life, you would think of that. The second reason that I want to do Daniel is because I am making a trek to Jordan again at the end of November and first part of December. And in the seminary there, I'm teaching Daniel. And this is the second or third time I've taught that. And you would think I would know it all by now, but I have to go back and review it again because my mind lets it leak out. And so I'm going to be looking through those things again. And in the process, there will be some lessons that I think will be beneficial for us to look at. So rather than start in chapter 1, I want to start in chapter 6, and we're starting with a story that you know very well. Just off the top of your head, you may have already looked. What story is in Daniel chapter 6? Daniel in the lion's den. If you teach junior church, if you teach Sunday school, if you teach kids, probably you're going to teach Daniel in the lion's den. And it is a fascinating story, a captivating story, because here is this man who stands for his faith, and then he's taken and dropped into the lion's den. And if you understand how the dens work, they would probably have an entrance on the ground level, and they'd put the lions in there, and then there would be some kind of opening at the top. And that opening may have normally been to feed the animals, and they would drop things in there. We don't know exactly how it was set up, but that would kind of make sense to us. And so here is Daniel taken out there, and the king drops him into the lion's den. And when he drops him into the lion's den, then, of course, the lions are going to eat him. No, you tell the kids, the lions didn't eat him. God protected him. And then the next morning, the king comes and takes him out. And then who does he throw back in there? All the guys that hated him. It's a great story. All these guys that set him up, then the king brings them, and he throws them in. And these lions that didn't touch Daniel, bang, instantly, they're now hungry, and they devour these other men. It's a great story. It's a fascinating story. And a lot of times, especially when we're talking about talking to kids, we really focus on the lions and being thrown in there, and the good lesson of it, that God can protect you, and how Daniel stood for his faith, and all of those are right lessons. But there's a lot more in that passage. There are some other things that are valuable. I think for me, when I look at Daniel, and I was tempted to start in chapter 1, because there is a question that if we ever get to the place where we just sit down and talk to people, there are a couple of people that I want to talk to. And some of those people are Daniel's parents. Any of you know what I might want to ask Daniel's parents? Matter of fact, not just Daniel, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I want to ask their parents something. Any idea what that might be? Sam?
I would ask him, what did you do?
Absolutely. To what?
For your son to turn out?
Here are four guys, sorry. There are four men, young men. And probably they were taken, I can argue different ages, but somewhere between 12 and 18, but I'm going to say 16. That's the age that I've normally said. They were 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. They were young teenagers. And they're taken from wealthy homes. These are young men who were of some nobility. They were not from poor homes, and they were intelligent. And they were taken from their home, taken to a foreign land, and they were given the opportunity to learn everything that the heathen world has to offer. You can eat it, you can have the pleasures of it, you can do whatever you would like. And whatever these parents did, whatever school they were in, whatever synagogue they were in, had done a fantastic job of preparing them. And I don't know if that's simply God preparing them and protecting them. I'm not sure what it was, but I would love to talk to these parents and say, tell me a little bit about what you did. Because so often a young person will go into an environment and they'll face those temptations, and it's like candy. I got to have it, and I just can't resist it. And you don't keep your faith. You don't you don't resist. You don't maintain your relationship with the Lord. And here are three young men that stand up when everybody bows down. Daniel wasn't there in chapter 3. And they stood up. They said, you know what? We've learned somewhere in our early life we have been taught you don't bow to idols, and we can't bow to this image. And we're going to stand. Regardless of what happens, we're going to stand. And they did. And God honored them and blessed them for that. Then you come to Daniel. He's no longer a teenager. By the time you get to chapter 6, if Daniel was 16 when he was taken into captivity, we're now 66 years into the captivity. How's your math tonight? So how old was Daniel if he was 16 and he had been there 66 years? He's 82. So he's not at all a teenager. He is now a seasoned government official. He has been there through the reigns of 3, maybe 4 kings, and he has seen a lot in his time. But here is a man who started as a teenager, and he maintains his faith until he's at least 82. And we know that he maintains it longer than that. But what was it that kept him from falling prey to a world around him that wanted to swallow him up, that gave him every opportunity to be swallowed up, that he would lose his faith? Well, we'll come to that because we will go back to chapter 1 in 2 weeks, and we'll look at chapter 1, and we'll get some hints on that. We don't have the answers because we don't have information from their parents, but they had learned some good habits. They had intellectually been taught. They knew some things. And of course, that's the battle, to go from intellect to actually putting it in place. But I wanted to start here because this gives us a real picture of the character of Daniel. So let's begin with Daniel 6, verses 10 and 11. Daniel 6, verses 10 and 11. I'm going to read tonight from the New American Standard just because I want some words clarified here. So some of you have King James Version, and you'll hear words and think, oh, wow, I didn't know that's what it meant. And it'll give you a little different view of it sometimes. But verse 10, it says, "And when Daniel knew that the document was signed, he entered his house. Now in his roof chamber he had windows open toward Jerusalem. And he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before his God, as he had been doing previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and supplication before his God." Now let's stop there. When you hear those 2 verses, there are a number of phrases that I hope jump out at you. Just let me ask out of curiosity, when you read through those, what are the phrases? And you can say them either in the phraseology of New American Standard, or I probably have them memorized better in King James. What are the phrases that stick out to you a little bit? What are some things that you notice about that record of his prayer? Joe? Yeah, this was the habit that he had formed. And this is something that I think teaches us, even as adults, as parents, somewhere along the line, he had formed a habit of praying toward Jerusalem. This was something that David had done, is pray toward Jerusalem, and Jeremiah praying toward Jerusalem. David was often in Jerusalem, but they would pray toward Jerusalem. So they would often open their window. In our case, we would face this way, east. Jerusalem would be that way. And they would face that direction, and then they would pray, and it was something they did 3 times a day. That was regular. All right, good. What else do you notice? What? Grace?
He would give thanks
Yeah, in his prayer, he gave thanks. This was not just coming saying, Lord, give me. It was, Lord, thank you. And I could see somebody in his circumstance complaining, but here's a guy who gives thanks. All right, I saw some other hands. Chipper?
I've always thought his consistency as he did aforetime.
Yeah.
He did it all the time.
Yep. King James says, as he did aforetime. New American Standard says, as he had been doing previously. This was not something new to him. This was what he had been doing for a long, long time. He has been praying, and when the decree came down that he could no longer pray, he continued to pray. All right, give me one other one maybe. What else do you see? Anything else? All right, Pastor Rogers?
Kind of at the beginning, even after he knew he'd be punished for doing it, he stayed consistent.
Yeah, he just said, I knew the document was signed. I know it's been signed. This is justifiable civil disobedience. God has said to do something. The government has said you can't. God said, don't pray to anyone other than the God of heaven. They said you pray to Darius. And I'm trying to change the way I say that. I've always said Darius, and I believe the correct way to pronounce it is Darius. And so they said Darius as kind of an emperor type figure, he is God. And they flattered him and said, you know, you put out this decree that just for 30 days, it's not for a long time, but for 30 days, you can't pray to anybody except Darius. And it's only 30 days, so, you know, you're okay. It's kind of like you can't go to church for a while, but, you know, we'll let you go eventually. But he said, no, this is something that God has told me to do. And I'm going to pray to God. I cannot pray to Darius. And so he decides, I'm going to do this because it's the right thing to do. All right, so you've got this prayer then, and in this prayer, it is set up by the text of what we have beforehand. And so let's back up to verse 1, back up to the very first part. Let's just remind ourselves about the story itself. And as you go to this, the first thing you find in verses 1 through 3 is Daniel's position. So here he is in the position. It seemed good to Darius to appoint 120 satraps over the kingdom. If you want to know what a satrap is, it's kind of like a ruler of an area, might be the easiest way to say it. He gives each person a section. He said, I'm going to set you in charge of this part of the country. Maybe if you were to think of it would be smaller than counties, but that kind of a setup where he says, I'm going to put some kings or some satraps over these areas. So he said 120 satraps over the kingdom, that they should be in charge of the whole country. And over them, over top of these three commissioners, of whom Daniel was one, that these satraps might be accountable to them, to those three, and that the king might not suffer loss. Now, you could take the time to look at all of that, but the king was concerned because he was taking over this country. He didn't want to have financial loss. He didn't want to lose control. And so this was really a great reorganization. He was doing this was a brilliant plan, a great plan. He's putting these 120 people in positions and saying, I'm holding you responsible for that area, and you are going to report to one of these three guys. And so it's really a good plan. As you go to verse 3, it tells us what becomes the problem. Then this Daniel began distinguishing himself among the commissioners and satraps because he possessed an extraordinary spirit. King James says an excellent spirit. And if we were to take a rabbit trail here, there are a number of times in Daniel that he is commended because, man, this guy has an excellent spirit, an extraordinary spirit. Kind of like the Joseph idea that regardless of what happens, he just got a good spirit about him. And people recognize that. And when he had this extraordinary spirit, it says, and the king planned to anoint him over the entire kingdom. And so here's a plan that the king sees. They put this in place, and Daniel distinguishes himself people like him, and he is good at what he does. Now remember, he's how old? 82. Has he ever done this before? You know your history? Yeah, he's done it before. Ron, do you remember for whom? Yeah, there you go. He served for 39 years as part of Nebuchadnezzar's government, a foreign government. I was talking to Pastor Rogers, and he talked a little bit about Nehemiah in a foreign government setting on Wednesday night. Well, here's Daniel, same thing. He's serving in a government that is not, it doesn't want to please God, has nothing to do with God, but he's serving faithfully. And so, as somebody who's had 39 years of experience, he is distinguishing himself. You know, you can think of all the things that kind of experience gets you. You know, one of the things that we always love about having like Charles come and substitute in a class is because we're not afraid that the kids are going to tell him, oh, you're supposed to take us to the gym and let us play the whole hour. That's what the teacher does. Well, no, he's been in class for, 100 years or something like that? And no, we don't do it that. That's not how it works. And Daniel has that kind of experience. And so it elevates him. He just has this great spirit, this ability, and he's able to distinguish himself. All right? So, then verse 4 through 9, we learn that there is a plot against Daniel. So beginning in verse 4, then the commissioners and satraps, notice that it was both. It was these other two over whom Daniel was going to be appointed, and those 120, I don't know if it was all of them, but it was a lot of them, the commissioners and satraps began trying to find a ground of accusation against Daniel in regard to government affairs. But they could find no evidence of accusation or evidence of corruption, inasmuch as he was faithful, and no negligence or corruption was to be found in him. Then these men said, we shall not find any ground of accusation against this Daniel, unless we find it against him with regard to the law of his God. Then these commissioners and satraps came by agreement to the king and spoke to him as follows. King Darius, live forever. Here starts the flattery. So you have this plot now that's formed by these high-ranking people to tear Daniel down. They're looking for anything. Now, in that, I hope you notice that here are 124 people if everybody's involved. And they have a lot of contacts. And they're saying, hey, give me something on Daniel. I mean, when you were working with him, didn't he take a little out of the coffers or something? No, I never saw him do that. Well, didn't he build something for himself? No, he didn't do that either. Boy, what a reputation. And his reputation was stellar. And that, I hope, speaks to all of us of the importance of that in a fallen world. And they finally say, if we're going to find anything against him, it's got to be in relation to his God. That's the only thing I know that we can attack. And so they begin in verse 7. They say, well, here we go. King Darius, live forever. All the commissioners of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the high officials and the governors have consulted together that the king should establish a statute and enforce an injunction that anyone who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days shall be cast into the lion's den. Now, in the New American Standard, it's the first word, all. I don't remember if it is in the King James or not. Is it? What's wrong with that statement? What was that? All right, only two of them? All right, two commissioners, yeah. Who's? They said, all of us have. Joe? It wasn't Daniel. So here they come and say, King, all of us agree this is a great idea. Well, if Daniel was standing there, he would be going, wait a minute. I don't remember voting for that. But that's the way they present it. There's no hesitation when you get into something like this for people who have a plot against you to lie, to manipulate. to twist things. Some of you have been through things like that. That is going to happen, and we have to be prepared for it. And so they say, all the commissioners. Well, there were two that agreed, but there was a third one that did not agree. All these people agree that's not true. So you go to verse 8. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it may not be changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which may not be revoked. Similar to what happened in Esther, that Haman got the king to sign a decree that they could kill the Jews, and it couldn't be changed because that was the law of the Medes and Persians. And so verse 9, therefore King Darius signed the document, that is the injunction. You are not allowed to do something. That's what an injunction is. And here they are going to the king, and they're using the flattery, king, you're just wonderful. You are God on earth, and we're going to recognize you for that, and we're going to show people who you are. And so at this point, we have Daniel's prayer. And these are the two verses we read just a moment ago. And in these verses, the very first part of it says, now when Daniel learned that the document was signed, he entered his house, and the roof chamber, and in his roof chamber, he had windows open toward Jerusalem. So this was something that was set up way in advance. It was something he did and he was used to. And it goes on to say, and I've highlighted a few words here, and in this it points out the very things that you pointed out. He continued kneeling. This was not something that he was reactionary. The king says you can't pray, so I'm going to pray. You know people like that, and I know people like that. No, it says he continued kneeling on his knees 3 times a day. This was not something that he was casually doing. This was something he was serious about. Praying and offering praises. I think it was Grace that picked that out. That he's thanking the Lord. He's praising God. He said, I'm going to petition God, but I'm going to praise my God. I'm praying and offering praises before my God, just as he had been doing previously. If we want to know why he was successful for 82 years, you'd have to say that this has a lot to do with it. This has a lot to do with why he was able to withstand some of the pressures that he was withstanding. You go to verse 11. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel offering a prayer and imploring favor before his God. So they come and they find him doing exactly what they knew he would be doing. I didn't point it out, but if you saw the title of this is Where and When. They knew where Daniel would be, and they knew when he would be there. This was the secular world. They knew where he would be, and they knew when he would be there. And they knew what he would be doing. They knew that he would be in his house, kneeling, praying 3 times a day. That's just who Daniel is. He is the same. This is him. He doesn't change with the winds. He doesn't change with everything else that's going on around him. He is a man who's going to go and pray toward Jerusalem 3 times a day. And I wonder if some of them had listened in and they had heard him thanking God and praying and offering praises. And in their report, it makes this note. It says he was offering a prayer and imploring favor before his God. Now, I'm sure that he is praying to God and saying, God, help me with this. Let me know what to do it. There are a couple of things I think he would have probably prayed regularly about. There's a lot of responsibility in high office. Some of you, even the group that's here tonight, some of you are in high-pressure jobs, situations where you have a lot of responsibilities, people reporting to you, things that you have to be in. I am sure that he brought those before the Lord. I don't have any doubt about that. I think Daniel probably prayed for physical strength. He's 82, remember? And that's not an easy thing to be in charge when you are that age. And so he's praying, God, give me spiritual strength, give me wisdom, give me physical strength, and he's imploring God now for favor. God, will you smile upon me? Help me to do what you want me to do. And at this point, then they come in. And of course, after his prayer, we're not going to read through the rest of this. These are some of the divisions Ryrie has. I've added a few to this, but you have his persecution at that point. He knew that things weren't going to go well. And so he is persecuted, he's thrown into the den, and he's protected while he's there. That's the part people normally focus their attention on, that God puts his hand upon him, and God answered his prayer. Remember, he implored favor. Lord, help this to happen. And God did. This is an answer to prayer. And then the promotion of Daniel. By the time the chapter's over, the very thing that these men were trying to keep from happening was flourishing. The king says, we're going to fear and tremble before the God of Daniel. Daniel's God was promoted because of what he did. And then the last verse in this chapter says, so this Daniel enjoyed success in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. And so under these two kings, he enjoyed success. Well, if we were to ask, well, why did he enjoy success? I think you have to say it's because here is a man who has established some habits that keep him from falling prey to the temptations of the world around him. He knew his God. And when we go back to chapter 1, I think we're going to see then some of the things at the very beginning that are going to help us see those same habits. Some of the same things that kept him from falling prey as a teenager were going to be the things that would help him as an 82-year-old. All right, we're going to stop there tonight, and we're going to take time to break into our groups and pray. On the back of your bulletin, we have Jay and Pam Sprecher, Thane, Wyoming, Friendship Baptist Church. And so pray for their church. And then the Taclobs, they will be here in about a month, and you'll see them. They're in the Philippines. And then Aaron and Emily Thompson, they're in Japan with Bethel Bible College. And then a couple of specific requests from them, the salvation of Mr. K and Mr. A. And then wisdom for Mr. S, a school student for her future, or Mrs. S. And then wisdom in finding a location for the next church plant. And Aaron said in his email that they feel humbled and blessed that the Keystone family will be praying for them over the next 2 weeks. And so let's be faithful about praying for them. And then you'll see we have the continuing request. And then Mary Price, one of her relatives is having a kidney transplant, and so pray for her. And then don't forget to pray for Dunya as they get things set up, that the doctors will be able to physically help her, and then that this family would just be spiritually encouraged and would flourish and grow as they're here. All right? Let's go ahead and divide into the groups. Todd, could you take a group to the back for me, please? And then Bill, will you do a group toward the front of men? And then Christy, can you do a group up here? And let's see, Jess, will you do a group in the back for me? All right, so we'll do those 4 groups, and when you're finished, just slip out to the foyer